Hi everyone, welcome, thanks for joining us. My name is Vic and I'm from a company called GWI. We have got a brilliant panel today and we're going to be talking about tapping into women's football fans. And this is a brilliant audience to be targeting. When you look at people who are watching football across the world, the people who say that they watch the Women's World Cup but not the men's has actually grown 20% or more in the last 2 years. And what I love about that stat is it tells us that there's a unique audience around the women's football team. It's not simply an offshoot of men's football. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about targeting that unique audience. So, to kick us off, a quick intro from each of the panel. Yvonne, should we start with you?
I'm getting the eyes. Quieten down, Mancunian. I'm getting the eyes. Hi, everyone. My name is Yvonne Harrison. I am the CEO of Women in Football. We work to support women working in the industry right across the game, from men's and women's football. Recently awarded Women's Football Champion at the Women's Football Awards, which is really nice. And it's a massive area of passion for us as a team to really support the women's game to grow, celebrate what's going on, which is amazing, but also highlight some of the challenges that still exist within the women's game. So that is me.
Hi, I'm Izzy Trimble from Copper90, football media business. I'm a senior strategist there, so I work across kind of brand strategy and also research and insights. I work across both men's and women's football, but women's football is where kind of my heart really sits, and really helping brands understand who the women's football audience is now and who it can be in the future. I work with the likes of Chelsea, EA Sports, Pepsi, amongst a few others, Adidas too. So I'll pass over to you, Claire.
Great. My name is Claire Cronin. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Chelsea Football Club. And like Izzy, look after the men's team, the women's team, the academy teams. And very proud of the fact that Chelsea secured their 5th WSL title, consecutive victories in a row, for which I can claim no credit whatsoever. I only started working there last August and have zero to do with what happens on the pitch.
Good, that's very humble of you. Nice. As you can see, we've got a brilliant panel. We've got lots to talk about, so I'm going to get to it. I wanted to start by just talking about women's football fans, what that fan base looks like. And Izzy, I'm coming to you first. So how have you seen the women's football fan base change over the past couple of years? There's been a lot going on. So what's changing in that fan base?
Yeah, so let's just go very simply demographically. We're seeing a much younger fan come in. If you compare, I won't do too many comparisons of men's football to women's football here, but you're looking at just probably under 50% of the women's football audience at under 34. If you look at the men's, that's kind of under 40%. So it's younger. We're also seeing it move to a more equal gender split. It was originally kind of more kind of male dominated, and now we're beginning to see a much more kind of even kind of path between the genders. And actually women are just slightly pipping it, but always really important to remind yourselves that it's because it's women's football, it's not just about speaking to women, to girls. And then I guess the other bit, which I'm sure Claire can speak to, is that they're willing to spend. There's no, we've seen ticket prices increase over the past few years, and we've seen attendances rise. Fans are seeing a value on this game, and its freebies don't really work in terms of actually bringing people in. People are wanting to kind of contribute, and they're wanting to be entertained, and they're being so.
Which is a good sign. Yeah. That's what we want. So Claire, coming to you, Izzy touched on you being able to give us a bit of an insight. How are you using data and insights to understand this fan base? And what are the key differences in this fan base that we should be aware of?
So as Izzy said, we also see that the vast majority of fans who come to watch football and buy the tickets are men. So on the women's game, 55% of the people buying the tickets are men. And on the men's games, it's 86% are men. So we've still got a majority audience on both sides. But like Izzy says, we also see a younger demographic purchasing and coming to the games on the women's side. But I think this is where we need to go a little bit of a step deeper. So what we see, we know that the price point for men's season ticket are much, much higher than the women's.
Yeah.
It's over £3,000. And if we compare, we see about, 70% of the people who are going to the matches at Stamford Bridge because of the price point are kind of over the age of 45. In contrast with the women's game, where the prices are much more affordable, then we see about 69% of the people coming are under the age of 44. But I think it's the price point which makes it so much more accessible, which is driving the age range down. So I don't think we should just read into the top line figures as to, therefore, the people who support women's football are young and mainly female, and mainly the people who support men's football are older and men. It's just not as cut and dried as that.
No, and not simple.
No.
How's it making you think about how you engage this fan base? That kind of those insights that you're getting, how you...
So one of the things I love about the women's game is there's so much collaboration between us and the other clubs, and then also with Newco itself. So just this morning we had a presentation from the CMO of Newco, who was sharing with us some of the insights and things they're seeing. And one of the big call-outs coming from the attendees of women's football was that they don't want the match experience to be templated based on the men's Premier League, but nor do they want it to be like a big razzle-dazzle spectacle that is like the Super Bowl. What they're saying to us is, we want you to understand what we want. We're a new audience, and we want you to ask us for our opinions about what attracts us to the game, what would we like to see there, what would make more of our friends come with us, and then tailor an experience to that. And we see very different things coming out from our own. We use a tool called Yonder to ask our fans for insights.
Nice.
And unsurprisingly, if you're a parent and if you're a woman, the things they want are things like access to lots of clean loos, to be able to get an oat milk latte, to be able to get a salad. And so some of the provision at Stamford Bridge is too geared towards an older audience that was a male audience, where there's lots of kind of fried food, there's lots of beers. And by the way, the newer demographic of men are also saying to us, we also want salads, and we also want, 0% beers and things like that. So we're seeing that shape how we think about the new stadium design project that we do, the kind of the half-time entertainment that we do, and some of the brands that we partner with, because the women's audience in particular feel very passionate about. They love supporting a growing game. Yeah. They love the fact that the players want to support a growing game, and they want brands to enter the space who they feel match their values and also want to authentically grow the game.
Yeah. Don't make assumptions basically about this audience, right? Ask them what they want. Yeah, absolutely. So Yvonne, coming to you, more and more girls are playing grassroots football. In fact, this year is the first year where football is the most popular sport amongst 12 to 15-year-old girls in the UK, which I think is brilliant, beating netball, swimming, hands down. What do you think this means for that sort of next generation of football fans, and what it's going to look like in the next couple of years? Because both Izzy and Claire, you've touched on that younger generation coming through. Do you think we're going to see a new wave?
Yeah, definitely. I think the more girls you get playing the sport, the more they want to watch it, the more they want to relate to the players. I mean, we've seen the Lionesses as an example when they won the Women's Euros and also around the Women's World Cup, but just generally in the Barclays WSL Championship, like, they're amazing role models and they care passionately about paving the way for more girls to play. So I think more girls playing is going to lead to more girls wanting to watch. And if there are any parents in the room, Pester Power is a very real thing, and actually they want to go and watch. And as Claire said, it's more affordable. So that's a really important factor. And it's generally a pleasant experience, less language, less aggression, etc. No less passion, by the way, because some people mistake that for, oh, it's really quiet. It's absolutely not. So I think there's a real opportunity for particularly the younger generation to normalise women and girls playing football, watching football, seeing it on TV, celebrating these role models. And I think that's hugely exciting for brands to connect in a different way with a different audience that will spend. You know, if I think of my own household, I make all the purchasing decisions in our house, much to my husband's disgust. But I do for my kids. So I think there's huge opportunity to sort of engage in a very, very different way. And I think the role model piece, people are interested in what these players are doing in their lives, not just on the pitch. So it creates some real opportunities for amazing stories in different kinds of brands that wouldn't typically get involved in football to do so. So I think the growth is really exciting. And I think it was interesting listening to those stats around the number of men that are watching the game. And again, bringing, more women going to watch football, but also bringing male fans across and creating new fans. We know that lots of fans coming into women's football are brand new to football, full stop. So again, huge opportunity, and it's really exciting to see kind of the legacy, I guess, of the Women's Euros, the work that the FA have done, and I'm sure the NUCO will continue to engage with them and drive participation. I'm sure netball and swimming will be a bit fuming, and we've seen developments recently around the new Netball Super League and how to sort of professionalise that. So football is leading the way, and it's exciting.
Nice, yeah, lots of exciting stuff coming. So moving on to that, how to engage this audience in real life and online. Izzy, I wanted to come to you and talk about, so we've seen such a rise in popularity, and I think the last couple of years particularly, right, that's no secret. But what have you seen change in the way that those fans are engaging online? Because I think that's really interesting. And I know I was lucky enough to be at a talk with Izzy recently, and we had Steph Catley speaking, and she had said, I'm delighted when there's a lot of passion and scrutiny online about our game and how we play. I'm not talking about the trolling or the abuse, we don't need that. But the passion, which you touched on as well, seeing that and people critiquing the players in the same way they do the men's players is brilliant, right? So what are you seeing happening online and what's changing in that online engagement?
I think first and foremost, you've got to remind yourselves that this women's football fandom was built online. If you look at the men's game, it's, it was built way before the internet, and then it's had to make this move over. So it's a very socially native audience. I would say a few years ago, it was very much women's football online media was very much in a space of kind of just newscast. It was just kind of where you'd find information. There wasn't a lot of conversation. Obvious reasons for that being that the football conversation was dominated by the men's game. There weren't really safe spaces for people to be able to publicly kind of talk about their fandom. But now we've got kind of plenty of platforms kind of built from the community that have started on your likes of Instagram, TikTok, and they've really responded to this conversational piece of people wanting this kind of always on entertainment. So, they'll have their Instagram profiles. They'll be posting content kind of daily, but they're also moving into dark social. So they're adding in kind of Discord communities, your kind of like WhatsApp groups. And that's where we're beginning to see the eruption of so many different communities within the women's football space, and a lot more effort from from media brands and from kind of grassroots football communities into building kind of conversational pieces. I think with Copper 90, we've totally responded to that and making sure that our formats are making sure that we're putting fan voices first. So it's not just about seeing the same old kind of oracles of the sport telling us kind of what's what. It's being able to find kind of who are the diehards of like Tigres over in like Mexico through to kind of to Lewis over here in the UK, but really making sure that those fan voices are kind of first and foremost, but are also promoting conversation rather than it just being a one-way broadcast. Yeah, and it comes back to the authenticity, doesn't it? Make assumptions about the audience and the fan base and you're screwed, really, aren't you? Because they're community-led and, absolutely. So Yvonne, and I think there's many, what challenges do you think there specifically are in engaging Gen Z and this younger audience around women's football?
So I think there's something that was touched on there. The community has grown online. And if I think from a brand perspective and probably with clubs, the cost of, hosting a game, for example, at Stamford Bridge is significant. And so you need those audiences in those stadiums. That's what brands want. That's what clubs want. But you can also engage online. You can watch it on the TV, which is brilliant. And the free-to-air, we've seen how massively that's impacted kind of viewing figures and stuff. So I think there is this balance between how do we hook people in and how does the game need to evolve to address the needs of its current audience, because it's not a case of replicating how it works for men's and obviously the survey that you talked about, super important. We often get it a lot at women in football. Oh, women think this. Like, we're 4 different women, we've got 4 different experiences, and there's loads more of you in the audience. So you can't just assume we're not all the same. So I think that's definitely a thing. I think hooking in via the social media to get regular feedback and tell stories is really important. And I think obviously the work that yourselves are doing around that is key, because without that, the game will kind of burst in and it'll be static and then you'll lose people. So it'll be interesting to see, will we grow regular, consistent, big audiences in stadia, or do we need to deliver that in a different way? I think it's fascinating as kind of the league professionalizes even more, and we've got new people sort of coming into the game, and clubs responding in different ways. You know, you've got the Chelseas, Man United, Cities, Arsenals of this world, you know, they're big clubs. And then you've got others that are kind of smaller, and how do they... Yeah, we've seen the games announced at the Emirates, which is really exciting. If you're an Arsenal women's fan, like, that's huge. But how can other clubs do that? There'll almost be an expectation from fans, well, we need to do that. And then what, how do you manage the PR of that when people go, what do you mean we're not having all of our games here? Like, it's really interesting. So the thing for me, there are loads of challenges. What we have to do is listen to the consumer voice and really work with them to try different things. Like, try things, fail fast. They'll just keep sort of trying. And I think the women's game will look very different in 5 years' time.
Yeah. Hope so, in a good way, I think, absolutely. So Claire, coming to you, both Izzy and Yvonne have touched on how many people are coming to the games now. It's great, selling more tickets. I know it's not that simple though, right? So we've seen this brilliant increase, but what challenges are you having with engaging the fans in real life and getting them to... There's still big challenges to overcome, right?
There is. And ultimately, we're trying to grow fan communities all over the world, but like 99.9% of our fans are never going to come to a physical game at Kings Meadow, where we play a lot of the women's matches, or at Stamford Bridge, where we play the men's and the women's. So, absolutely, as Yvonne said, we've got to try and find ways to engage the fans through virtual experiences so they feel like they're there, even if they can't afford to come or travel there. But for the ones who actually do make the journey, we're very focused on how do we make it a regular thing, because in the men's game, what we see is absolute avid followership, week in, week out, come rain or shine. And there's a really strong commitment from core fans who will go and watch them all around the country, all over the world.
Yeah.
And we want to build that for Chelsea Women's. We absolutely want to build a packed out stadium, a secondary market for tickets. That for us is what success looks like. But in order to get there, there's still quite a lot of awareness building to do around the game itself. I mean, I live 10 minutes away from the football ground, and prior to coming to work here, I had no awareness of the women's team. I would never see them in mainstream culture. So, I'm 44 years old. And I grew up at a time when it was like lacrosse and netball were my kind of like chosen sports at school. There was no option to play football. And so it wasn't really on my radar. And so even though I live around the corner from Stamford Bridge, I wasn't really aware that they had a women's team. And so I would never have physically seen it around my local area. There would have been no marketing around it. Yeah. But then in the kinds of spaces that I was reading, like I read the Times newspaper, I might be on BBC, I wouldn't come across it. And so if we want to get more people, and I do mean people, not just girls, not just boys, but men and women, more people to discover the amazing entertainment of women's football, we have to go to the environments and the media they're currently occupying. Yeah. And so that means like getting into style magazine pages, like getting the women out of their sports kit into fashion shoots, into other environments, so the people who haven't come across upon them discover them. Because we know, especially from the women's game, and as Izzy and Yvonne both touched on, they really care about the players. And I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from F1. So previous to this, I worked at McLaren, and we were very focused on how do we grow the women and the Gen Z audiences. And the number one thing that grew it was the Drive Survive program. Yeah. So we have to look at things that other sports have done to try and penetrate popular culture and move it out from the back of the sports pages. And let's be honest, if it's women's coverage, then it's like 1% of the sports coverage. Right. So you've got to penetrate the mainstream media and other cultural avenues in order to get them discovered.
I mean, it's an interesting marketing challenge. It's a fun marketing, right? Thanks for that. I'm actually going to come back to you because I want to move on to talking about how brands and marketers are actually tapping into this audience. Some are doing it brilliantly, I think. Some not so much. But are you seeing a genuine increase in an interest from brands to, do they think it's an opportunity to create brand exposure, and are they seeing these as strong sponsorship opportunities? Are you seeing that increase?
We're seeing a massive increase across the board. So we're seeing an increase in venture capitalist companies, banks wanting to invest in the women's team because they see that it's a massive growth vehicle. And then we're seeing brands themselves looking at the women's game and saying, as Yvonne said, it's a really great family environment. Yeah. It's a great place to host and entertain your kind of key audiences and key clients. we're seeing that it's a really joyful, uplifting environment. There's a lot of focus on transformation, like how do you transform the game for good? How do you innovate? And so that really appeals to brands who are on a transformation journey themselves. And so what we've seen is that some of our partners like Skoda are always focused on how they reposition their brand, how they do things in a different way. And so when we launched our women's podcast early this year, they said, you know what, we'd love to be the headline sponsor for that. Nice. So the types of brands who want to partner with women's football are ones who are already invested in innovation and transformation in their core brand. And they're the ones who naturally gravitate to us. But we're seeing more and more mainstream premium brands want to participate on the women's team. And that's really important because previously it's very much been, oh, well, if you buy into the men's team, almost treating the women as a buy one, get one free. And we refuse to engage in that. We want the women's team to be financially sustainable, able to stand on its own 2 feet, which is why we won't discount tickets and we won't discount on sponsorship.
Nice. And as you say, it's a huge opportunity. If you're reaching a really diverse fan base, actually, and families are a massive opportunity, right? So interestingly, linking to that, Yvonne, do you think that brands see these opportunities as genuine commercial opportunities, or are they ticking a box and are they doing it because they think it looks good and it's the right thing to do?
I think there's probably an element of both. I think there's a big education piece with brands really truly understanding the audience and actually having the data to be able to explain that is a massive, well, it's essential. It's not even something that's nice to do. Like, you've got to actually do that. I think if we look at, for example, Barclays, they've been across the professional women's game, and in fact, grassroots, they're the lead partner of Women in Football as well. Like, they've really fully invested for many, many years in this space. And I imagine, any renegotiations around leagues, etc., they'll be really tough now because the women's game is in a brilliant place. But they do it because probably it was the right thing to do initially. Now it's very much a commercial kind of venture. I think there will be brands that are kind of just jumping on the bandwagon, and we saw it a little bit with maybe some of the big major international competitions. They kind of come in late, they do a quick package, and then they sort of disappear.
Yeah.
And it's all of our jobs to kind of say that's not what we want. And to Claire's point around not discounting tickets, and absolutely, and we hear that more and more from different clubs. I think the other thing that's really interesting from a brand perspective is fans are also following players. So there's some really interesting research that was done around, if you support Chelsea men's team as an example, does that mean you automatically support Chelsea women's team? And it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. Now, you might have data that conflicts that.
No.
My understanding is that it doesn't. So there's an opportunity for brands not only to align with particular clubs, but with individual players. And then potentially, as that player moves on, you've suddenly got this whole swell of, we've seen the Messi, the Ronaldo effect. We've seen it with Lucy Bronze and others, going overseas to play. So I think that's quite an interesting and unique thing that opens up a door that maybe brands are not yet considering, but is huge in terms of potential commercial growth for them. And I think for clubs, ultimately being able to work with these players and maximise kind of their commercial viability while they're in the clubs, and treat them well. So when you hear a lot, like, look at Emma leaving that last match, oh my gosh, the Chelsea fans at Old Trafford, they were so loud. Emma will always be a fan of Chelsea and she'll always advocate for Chelsea. And I think where players are treated really well, you'll still get that. So even if they move, there'll still be an element of how brands associate with clubs and environments, which is really exciting. The smart brands will do this for commercial, but they have to recognise that the commercial return will not be immediate in many cases. And we're really important that we don't have brands coming in trying to get a bargain with the women's team. Like, you've got to value it for what it's worth and its growth. It'll be on a fast growth trajectory, I think. So don't come in and bargain basement, because we're not really here for that.
Absolutely not here for that. So Izzy, Yvonne mentioned Barclays as an example, but which brands do you think are tapping into this audience really well? And who's doing it? Who's doing it properly?
I think the good news is that we're seeing lots more brands actually doing the right thing rather than the wrong, which was probably the status quo a few years ago. I'd say the first example I'd probably go for is EA Sports. what was it, 4.1 billion games have been played with a female athlete this year, which is pretty nuts. That's just with EAFC bringing the women's game into Ultimate Team, which is one of their highest played kind of formats. And what I think is really interesting there is, they could have gone down the path of just recreating reality, just going for of course they've got to do that to a point of making sure that their body mapping and their face mapping is bang on, so you recognize these players in the game. But actually they took it a step further and were like, no, actually let's just create the future that we want to see, or it doesn't matter if it doesn't happen in the real world, but we can make this happen. And you can have Aitana playing next to Rice, you can have Sam Kerr playing with Mbappe, which does honour kind of women's football fans already kind of tapped in, but also brings in an audience that haven't necessarily seen women's football as a property that they hold any interest in or actually provides any value for them, but now it does. And it's not just what they produce in the game, it's also how they get there. So it's to what you were saying, the due diligence of making sure that you're entering the game in the right way. EA kind of said to us a few years ago when they were considering bringing kind of the women's club game into what was then FIFA 23, we don't have the knowledge base that we need to have to bring this in. So we built out basically a women's football degree for everyone, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a marketer. So it's making sure that you've got the back end sorted, as well as what you do kind of with the product, and then also how you talk about that. So it's then building the shoulder content off that, providing opportunities for conversation to kick off and to kind of entertain fans. I'd also say Amazon, actually. I was very impressed by their recent campaign. I think their line was something like, you bring the grit, we bring the kit. So it wasn't a case of we're just tapping into women's football because it's the right thing to do. It's actually no, we know that there are a whole load of people that are playing football that weren't necessarily, and they need to buy shin pads, they need to buy cones, they need to buy water bottles, whatever it is. And they work with this fangirl, who are a brilliant kind of social community who've branched into the consultancy space to help kind of guide them with their UEFA sponsorship. And then they also worked on a production level with a director who's involved in women's football, Molly Manning-Walker, who also runs Babe City FC, who are a grassroots women's team. So it's kind of thinking of working with the game, from back end to front end, and you see that authenticity run through, and you will get a pretty happy audience base off the back of that.
I think the important thing there is the reason those three brands are doing it is because they're making money from it. So I spent the first 10 years of my career at Barclays, and I know that when we launched into the Men's Premier League, it was because we needed to differentiate our brand against Abbey National at the time, Lloyds Bank, whoever it was. And they could prove, we could saw it in the insights and research, that the bank became more likable and people were more likely to buy products from us because of the Premier League sponsorship. And then as the female purchasing power bore through, then the customers were asking, well, you're already here for the men's, shouldn't you be here for the women's? Yeah. And as soon as they launched into the women's, they also then saw a massive tick up. And so, same for EAFC, they want to sell more games. Yeah. So all of the brands who want to do business with women's football are coming to the table because they know they're going to sell more, because everything comes down to the bottom line.
Oh, of course. And these clever collaborations are a great way, right, of, like you say, grassroots all the way through. Brilliant. So we've got a couple of minutes left before we're going to go to the audience and let them ask some questions. But I've got one quick fire question for each of you. So what do you think is the biggest opportunity for brands who want to tap into women's football fans in the coming years? What would your advice be to those brands looking to do so?
I think for me personally, it's get on board now. If you don't get on board now, it's going to cost you a lot more. And the fans of women's sport are loyal. They're more likely to buy from you. That's not just women, it's fans of women's sport more generally. So get on board now, you'll see the return. It's going to cost you a lot more later down the line. And to the authenticity piece, we care about who invests in our game. We really do care. So get on board and mean it. Don't just pop in and pop out, because people will see through that.
Yeah, get involved. Izzy?
Oh God, one piece of advice. I would say women's football, well, football as its own thing isn't there to solve the world's issues. It's fantastic that women's football is full of amazing people that are humans as well as they are athletes and as coaches. But I'd like to see more brands treat women's football as entertainment, because football is there to entertain, right? So let's have a little think about kind of, it's like a social first audience. Don't think of other sports being the competition. Lean into kind of the world of entertainment. Why aren't we playing more with kind of vertical social formats, right? Really thinking of where the audience are, how can you play where they are and entertain? I'd say that's my number one, rather than just going down the worthy route.
Yeah.
Do it in the right way, but
Make it fun.
Make it fun.
Yeah.
Bring the grit out. Bring out the personalities. Bring out the plots.
And then it all comes together, doesn't it? Claire?
I'd say, building on both of those examples, I'd say it's really about inviting brands to come to the table and co-create.
Yeah.
Because we can be unconstrained by the conventions of other sports, existing football teams, and I think the brands and the fans who are here at the outset can shape the sport in their own image and create a brand new spectacle, a brand new entertainment vehicle that really reflects their values. And I think that's incredibly exciting.
Agree. Brilliant. Brilliant. Quick fire round. Okay. We're over time, which is naughty. Any questions from the audience? I think we've got someone coming around with a microphone. I can't see very well because of the lights, but any questions? Oh, hi.
Hey. Go on. Hello? Oh, there it is.
Hello.
I work at Man United, and we are starting to see kind of like men's fan behavior starting to come into the women's game. Like lots of stuff this season we've not seen before, like manager out and negative sentiment around certain players and performances. How do you, I'm talking mostly again, I guess to you, Claire, but how do you manage that at Chelsea and trying to keep the message always positive?
That's a great question. I mean, I think what we've seen is there's a lot of policing that happens within the online community from the fans themselves, where they'll literally jump straight in and be like, hey, like, what are you, like, get out of this chat, like, take that to the men's team. We don't want to hear that here. So we see a lot of the self-policing happens there. And similarly, I mean, one of the things I was disappointed at is when we played FC Barcelona, there was a couple of times when there was like booing of them, like picking up the ball and kind of taking it. We were like, that isn't cool. And so we very much will call out the behavior and say, we love the women's atmosphere. It's really joyful. It's really uplifting. It's often likened to being like, you know, the Six Nations rugby, where you can have like different countries sat alongside each other, different rugby league teams sat alongside each other. And we really want to maintain that convivial, family-friendly environment where everyone is really passionate, but they're not aggressive. And I think the aggression, the kind of some of that, the negative side of the tribal behavior, we'll call out, and we invite our fans to call it out, and we'll stamp it out. So if people behave in a way that we think is unacceptable, we will pull them to one side and we will say to them, that's not within our kind of code of conduct, and we don't need their money that badly. So we would rather take them away from the game, have a quiet word. If they don't behave themselves, we'll exit them from the premises, because we're really focused on the enjoyment of the masses rather than a few people who look to take it into a different direction.
Nice. I think we've got time for one more. Any more questions? I don't think so. Let's give a big round of applause to our brilliant panel. Thank you very much.